Hey folks, my name is Nathan Johnston. Welcome to Lecture 2 of Vector Calculus, which is all about the velocity and speed of a path. So the setup today is we've got a path, which remember we can think of as a particle moving around a curve in space, and we want to find a way of quantifying how quickly and in which direction that particle is moving. Okay, so to sort of set things up here, let's just illustrate what's happening in the two-dimensional case. So if we've got a path from R to R2, that's, a particle moving around a two-dimensional curve, let's focus just on the X and Y coordinates of that particle. Okay, so if we want to quantify how the X coordinate is changing, how would we do that? Well, okay, the X coordinate, that's specified by a one variable function. I'm going to call that f sub 1, f1, okay? And that function just specifies what the X coordinate of that particle is, how far left or right it is. And if we think back to our very first differential calculus course, when you've got a function of one variable, if that function specifies position or distance traveled, then remember the derivative of that function specifies the velocity. Okay, so if I take that x coordinate function and just then take the derivative of it, that's going to tell me how the x coordinate is changing as time goes on. Okay, and I can also do the same thing for the y coordinate. Okay, if I take the derivative of the y coordinate function, which I'm going to call f2 in a second, then that's going to tell me how the y coordinate is changing. Okay, and the same idea works no matter how many coordinates there are, right? It doesn't have to be a two-dimensional picture here. If we add a function from r to rn, then taking the derivative of each coordinate is going to tell me how quickly that coordinate's changing and whether it's changing in the positive or negative direction. Okay, so I'm going to apply this idea here to just any path. If I've got a function that's a path, if I've got a function f that, it's going from r to rn, or more specifically, it's going from some interval in r to rn, okay, then I can write down functions that specify each of its coordinates. Okay, so f1, that's like the x coordinate, f2, that's the y coordinate, and then maybe you have n of them. Okay, then to keep track of how quickly this is moving in each of the different directions, I'm just going to take the derivative of all of those coordinate functions, okay? And I'm going to throw them into a vector, okay? This vector that I call f prime here, this is what we're going to call the velocity vector, just because it keeps track of how quickly f is moving in the first coordinate axis direction and the second coordinate axis direction, and so on up to the last one, okay? It keeps track of how quickly it's moving in each of the n different standard basis directions. Okay, so that function we're calling the velocity. Maybe I've convinced you that it's reasonable to call this a velocity, but maybe I haven't. But let's do some examples. Let's play around with this a little bit and try to get a feel for how it works, okay? So let's go to an example that we saw last lecture, okay? So we have this path from the interval pi 3 pi to r squared defined by f of t equals cos t sine t. Remember this path here, this gives us the unit circle excluding the leftmost point, right? The leftmost point is omitted because pi and 3 pi, the endpoints of the interval, are not included in the domain here. Okay, so we're going to compute the velocity of this path, and the velocity, just like the path itself, it's a vector, okay? And the way you compute it is just take the derivative of each of the entries. So cos becomes negative sine, sine becomes cos, and that's the velocity vector, okay? So in some sense, like that's the answer, that's fine and dandy, but like why do we care, okay? Like how do we visualize this? What's this telling us, okay? And probably the best way to visualize this is, okay, we're going to think of the path itself as a particle or a point, like usual, just a particle or a point moving around a curve, okay? And the velocity vector, though, we're going to think of that really as a vector, okay? And we're going to situate it so that its tail is located at the particle. Okay, and when we do that, well, think about like what was the point of the velocity vector? It told us how the particle was moving in each of the coordinate axis directions. Okay, so what this vector is doing is it's pointing in the direction of movement of the particle. So if I situate this so that its tail is located at the particle, then like this vector is pointing the way that the particle wants to move. Okay, so what we get in this particular case is the particle's moving around the circle, and the velocity vector, it's always just pointing straight forward from where the particle is, which is tangent to the circle. Okay? All right, and this always happens actually, okay? There's nothing special about this example here. The velocity vector always points in the direction of travel of the particle. It always points sort of straight ahead where the particle wants to go. All right, let's do another example here, okay? Let's go to this path here, which again, we saw this one in the previous lecture, okay? So this time the path, it's still going to R2, but this time it's defined by a slightly uglier formula. But remember this path, it traced out the exact same curve, okay? So it's still the unit circle, excluding the leftmost point. Okay, let's compute the velocity vector and then talk about geometrically a little bit. Okay, so for computing it, just do quotient rule in each of the entries, right? We've got a quotient of stuff here, so we got to do quotient rule when we take the derivative. So derivative of the left entry, we get derivative of the top times the bottom minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, all divided by the bottom squared. And same thing for the second entry, right? Derivative of the top, derivative of 2t becomes a 2. The bottom is just the bottom, and so on. Then top, derivative of the bottom and bottom squared. Okay, so that is our velocity vector. Let's clean that up a little bit. Okay, let's simplify those numerators, expand them out, collect like terms. I'm not going to expand out the denominators though. Okay, I like factored things, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so that's about as cleaned up as I can make the velocity vector, which at first, I mean, it doesn't look terribly enlightening, but if I plot this, again, in the same way as in the previous example, I'm gonna put this velocity vector with its tail right at where the particle is, and then I plot this vector. What happens is something very similar to in the previous picture, okay? This velocity vector, it's always pointing straight forward, which is tangent to the circle. It's pointing where, like, the particle, it's pointing at the instantaneous direction of movement of the particle, where the particle would keep moving if there wasn't sort of something pulling it towards the circle, something dragging it around. Like, you can sort of almost imagine, like, this particle, the reason it's moving in a circle maybe is someone spinning it around on a string. And then that velocity vector is, that's the direction that the particle would go if the string suddenly broke and there was nothing sort of tying it into the circle anymore. Okay, so it's sort of the direction that the particle wants to go in. Okay, so same idea here. The particle, it's still moving, the particle's still moving around the same curve. The direction of the velocity vector is the same, but you'll notice the length of the velocity vector is not the same. The length is very, very different this time. In the previous example, when it was like cos t sine t, the velocity vector, it always had the same length as it was moving around the circle, whereas this time, the velocity vector sort of at the left half of the circle is very short, and then it gets very long on the right half of the circle. Okay, so let's talk about that now. Okay, what's going on there? Why is the length of the velocity vector different on the left versus the right? To try to answer this question, let's again think back to how we define this coordinate-wise, okay? It's just this velocity vector, it keeps track of how each of the coordinates are changing, okay? It's how quickly each of those coordinates are changing. So if each of the coordinates are changing just a tiny little bit, then the velocity vector is going to be small, right? It's going to be a short vector because each of its entries is going to be small. Whereas if one or more of the entries is changing a lot, then the velocity vector is going to be longer, okay? So sort of the intuition that you should have here is that, the longer this velocity vector is, the quicker the particle is moving. And actually, we're just going to define that for now, okay? We're going to justify this definition a little bit better about 2 lectures from now. But for now, we're just going to we're going to say that the speed of a path is exactly this quantity. It's the length of the velocity vector, okay? And in particular, just to remind you, the length of a vector, remember, is you take each of the entries of that vector and you square them all, you add them up, and then square root the whole thing, right? This is the length of the vector or the magnitude of the vector or the 2 norm of the vector, if you like. That's what we mean. That's how we compute the speed of the particle or of the path. Okay, and so short velocity vectors correspond to when the particle is moving slowly, and long velocity vectors correspond to when the particle is moving quickly. Okay, and if we return to these previous 2 examples that we had, so these 2 examples on the unit circle, okay, the first one, it was f of t is cos t sine t. Well, remember the velocity of that was negative sine t cos t. If you compute the speed, then you just take the norm or the length of that velocity vector, you get negative sine t squared plus cos t squared, all square rooted. And when you compute that, I mean, sine squared plus cos squared equals 1, right? And the negative gets squared, so it goes away. We don't care about it. We just get 1 as the length, no matter what t is. And the fact that this is a constant, it doesn't depend on t, that corresponds to the fact that the velocity vector, it had the same length everywhere as it went around the circle in that first path that we computed the velocity of. Okay, if we go to the next one, right, the weird parameterization of the unit circle, so 1 minus t squared over 1 plus t squared, and then 2t divided by 1 plus t squared. Remember, we computed the velocity vector, okay? That was the thing where we did the quotient rule and then simplification. And now if we compute the speed from this, it's just, okay, we take this vector here, compute the length of it, okay? So take that first entry, square it. Take the second entry, square it, then add them up and square root the whole thing. And at first that looks like it's going to be kind of awful, but I mean, what happens is you square at the top here, square at the top there, and then collect like terms. It turns out it simplifies considerably. You've got a common denominator, so you can write it under one fraction, and a square root makes that denominator even simpler after you do that. The whole thing simplifies down magically. Just work through the algebra. You get 2 over 1 plus t squared as the speed of the particle or the path. Okay? Now, think about what this tells us, okay? What this tells us is when t is really, really big, either positive or negative, because it's getting squared, doesn't matter. Okay, so when t is really, really big, this denominator is really, really big. It's going off to infinity, so the whole thing's going down to 0. Okay, so sort of by the left portion of that circle, right? When t is going close to negative infinity, you're at sort of the left bottom part of the circle. And when t is going to positive infinity, you're at the left top part of the circle. In those regions, the speed's actually going all the way down towards 0 in the limit. Okay, so that's why the velocity vector was super, super short. The particle's moving insanely slowly over on the left half of the circle. And the speed is maximized, it's as large as possible when this denominator is as small as possible. In other words, when t is 0. Okay, so the speed here, it's maximized, its maximum value is 2 when t is 0, which, I mean, if you go back to the original path f and plug t equals 0 in, you'll find that you're at the rightmost point. You're at the point 1, 0. Okay, so that corresponds to, when we had this velocity vector that was looping around the circle and it was getting longer on the right-hand side, the longest it ever got was 2 units long at exactly the rightmost point of the circle. And that's the point when the particle is moving as quickly as possible. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll do more stuff with speed and velocity as we go on, but that's all I've got for you today, so see you next time.